Okay, so welcome everyone to our July monthly murmuration. We're so glad that you're all here. If this is your first time joining us, and I think for a lot of people it is, because I see a lot of new names on the call. You're welcome to have your videos on or off. It's totally up to you. We're kind of a small group, so it won't disrupt any bandwidth if you want to have them on, but totally fine to have it off. The way that these calls work is we try to bring together local phenology leaders that are people that are part of programs as well as nature's notebook observers to kind of chat about different topics. We usually base these around things that people really want to know about. So today we're really fortunate that we're going to be talking about how to get started with a new local phenology program. So if you're not part of a program, that's totally fine. I know we probably have a lot of independent nature's notebook observers as well. So everyone's welcome. I think there's always something to learn. So I'm actually going to pass it over to David Quinn, who is our Texas coordinator for the Time to Restore project. And David was kind enough to recruit two wonderful speakers today because he's very familiar with all the stuff going on in Texas and that kind of newer effort that we have there for Time to Restore. So I'm going to pass it over to David.
Thank you so much, Aaron. So when Aaron and I were first talking about kind of how to help out the group, and Meade and Tina, you're going to see that this group is really comprised of phenology observers and leaders from all across the country, all the way up in the Northeast, over to the Pacific Northwest, down to the Southwest, and then, of course, here in our great state of Texas. When we first started talking about this, we were like, wouldn't it be great to bring someone to the group who has just stepped into this role and really has embraced phenology and how to go about organizing in the hopes that they'll share perspective and some best learned lessons and just general experiences with the greater group. And so when we both agreed that that was probably a really exciting thing to do, the first two that came to mind is Tina Olivas, who is in North Texas, and Meade LeBlanc, who I've been working with here along the Gulf Coast, in the mid central southeast part of Texas, and their perspectives, while they're somewhat similar in what they set out to do, I think how they came to doing this is a rather unique story, and I think it will be of benefit to the group. So Meade and Tina, we're hoping that this will be just a very casual type conversation. We're hoping that you'll give a bit of a background about how you came to do this work. And then maybe what you've been doing over the last 5, 6 months since you and I have been working together to set up a local phenology program in your particular part of Texas. By way of background, go ahead and introduce for the benefit of everybody. Tina Olivas is actually a Master Naturalist in the Cross Timbers chapter, which is in Tarrant and Parker County, which is where Fort Worth is located. So to give you an idea where she comes from, that's a population, those two counties alone have a population of about 2.5 million people. The eastern half is extremely urbanized, and the western half is very rural. So we thought she could bring the perspective of having been in an urban area and bringing this kind of collective organizational effort for the local phenology program and project that she's been working on. Then we'll switch and go to Meade. Meade is actually in the Galveston Bay Area chapter of Texas Master Naturalist, which is a much smaller population, but probably impacted in a very different way. They are a coastal county, so they get a lot of tourism. Only about 400,000 in population for the entire county, but a lot of tourists come there. And a lot of tourists come there for nature-based experiences. So I think Meade's perspective will be very different in that regard. With that, I want to first personally express my appreciation for Meade and Tina stepping forward to have these conversations. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited to have you meet our group and learn a little bit about what we do. We hope you will enjoy this as well. And so, Tina, would you like to start us off, since I kind of met you first and then I met Meade shortly thereafter, and then we can go from there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you for that introduction and thank you for inviting me. Yes, I am a master naturalist, as David said, pretty new to it, actually just about 2.5 years. I'd been attending meetings, had wanted to move into a different area, came to Fort Worth, found some property we absolutely loved, and it's been the best blessing I could even imagine. I just love living here. It's really, Fort Worth is a wonderful city. You find they don't mow a lot. They like the wildflowers and the wild grasses, and it's not, so neat and tidy, and it's wonderful in that regard. So I've actually met a lot of buddies, kindred spirits in this group. So I've been good.
And that
As
wasn't a jab against Dallas, right, Tina?
no, no, not at all. Dallas is just different. I lived in Dallas before, loved living there as well, loved it. Fort Worth's a little, it fits me better. That's what I
Very
can say. It's a
fair
better fit
enough.
for me. That's all I can say. And I'm happy to be here. So I'm fairly new to all of this and getting involved. And I think that's somewhat been an advantage in some ways because a lot of the current volunteers, and I guess I can kind of get into one of the downsides, is they all see the value of this, love the value in it, but to be able to set aside to learn a new habit, add a new habit, and do it has been really a lot tougher than I thought. It was tough for me to start getting habits of weekly entry. I look at the plants all the time. I notice what they're doing all the time, but to sit down and get in nature's notebook and add it all in, it doesn't take much time, but it's still a new habit where you've got to get it in the swing of it to do. So, but essentially, as I started out, because I'm fairly new, I knew some folks that also were new. I reached out to them. I also went to the Master Naturalist class. I got in, they always do a presentation in the class where they talk about volunteer opportunities. And I got right in there and talked about it. And I got like 23 people. I gave them a list who's interested. Now, of those, I probably got about half of them doing it. So to me, that was really good. So get them going before they get over committed in other things. So that was worthwhile. The other thing was I did a lot of one-on-ones or two-on-ones to just literally log them, let them log into nature's notebook, pick their plants and show them how to do it. And I got better success with folks if I kind of did a little hand holding. So that was helpful. I also did a couple presentations. Most people are doing their own yard or their own site. One person volunteers at the Botanic Gardens and she does it as she goes in every week. So most people are doing my site though, but we did have three places that were interested in, they're there every week doing wildscapes and monarch way stations and nature preserves. So they were already people going there. And so for them, I went and trained individually. I went out to those sites, sat down with them, got them logged in, showed them, helped them decide on what plants that they wanted to go with. And
Hey,
mhm.
Tina, can I get you? I hate to interrupt you, but can you talk a little bit about the infrastructure you came to? Because I think the Cross Timbers chapter had an existing infrastructure that really lent itself to a local phenology program in terms of the
Yes.
native gardens. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that
yeah.
before you get
So,
into the volunteers? Thank
yeah,
you. Sorry for that.
no,
Yeah.
that's great. Several things that are really great about Fort Worth is uh, we have a nature center and refuge, wildlife refuge, and it's not far out of the city, where in most places you're driving a bit to go. They exist everywhere, but this is like 15 minutes from downtown Fort Worth that you can get to a nature center. They have bison, they're bringing back prairie dogs. It's just a wonderful place. We do pollinator gardens. And so I volunteer there at the greenhouse. And so we, keep repopulating, after burns and stuff, we, see what needs to happen. Or, some of it is for the tourists to make it a little pretty in the entryway and up at the at the center, but the rest of the place, we try to get rid of the invasives and then replace them with good stuff. So that's a wonderful place. Molly Holler, well, there's several places in Arlington
Yeah.
alone. They're just big champions for, there's Sherry Capehart Nature Center, there is Randall Mill Park, there's just so many places. Molly Holler, which also is one of our groups. It's named after an advocate for wildlife prairies, and they named this wildscape for her, and it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
it's catered. I mean, it's all native plants, but it's just stunning, honestly. And
Yeah.
so we just have a lot of that in Tarrant County where groups are already volunteering. I mean, there's probably 15 or 20. We have several monarch waste stations, several nature preserves, and the Master Naturalists volunteer and help there. So
Yeah.
already had folks who love native plants and pollinators, and we're able to, jump right in. So did that help answer?
Absolutely, Tina. I think that one of the things, y'all, for the benefit of the entire group, that really helped when Tina stepped forward and when Meade stepped forward was there was already a plug-in between the Master Naturalist chapter and the Master Gardener chapter in
Yes,
these
yeah.
existing demonstration gardens, and that made a huge step forward for everybody when we came along with Time to Restore and wanted to introduce the Nature's Notebook app, because it just lent itself to an existing kind of volunteer base that really kind of understood what story we were trying to tell. And so, Tina, talk a little bit, because you were one of the first to step up and say, you know what, I kind of like doing this wildscape thing, and this seems to be a natural fit. And so you jumped in really early on. Talk about maybe some of your wins and some of the things that you really think you might do a little differently, because I think you've been very
Yeah.
successful.
Well, I wouldn't say that yet. I mean, part of me is also overcommitted. I had another project that I
Not
coordinate for
complaining,
bats, and
Tina.
who doesn't love bats? Um, but it doubled in size, and I lost some volunteers, and then the Botanic Gardens did a news release, and so it was wonderful. I had,
Yeah.
two TV stations interview me and three newspapers, but it was a lot of my time. So
Yeah.
this kind of took a little back while I got through all of that, but and I'm working my way out of it. I have a second coordinator who's going to share half of it next
Yeah.
year. So I think I'm gonna do better for this project because of that. But I did, as I said, I just have made myself available, whether I did presentations at Master Naturalist meetings or I went out to these way stations and naturescapes and did presentations. One woman says, I'm having trouble getting set up. I get on a Zoom with them and show them how to do it. So that's actually been good. I use a lot of um, the screenshots from the presentations you've done, David, and you've
Yeah.
done, Aaron. I just
Yeah.
repurpose them and use the same screens. They were wonderful, and especially a lot of folks really like the reporting part. So I try to push what's going to happen, what the
Mhm.
benefits are with the reports that come out of this. I've also encouraged everybody to sign up for newsletters. I don't know how successful that's been, but I forward them on for a while to those who I know are doing it and say, hey, if you haven't signed up, sign up, because that keeps them in the loop, keeps it in more in their face than what I can do. Um, one other thing, and it's kind of silly, but Master Naturalists, we get volunteer hours, and we love our volunteer hours because we get pins every year based on how many hours we volunteer. And so, but it's usually a 15-minute increment. You have to do 15 minutes, which some of this stuff isn't 15 minutes. It's a couple minutes to go and look at, in my backyard, or if I'm at the nature center, I've got three little patches that I go examine each week. it doesn't take very long. So, but they did free that up for us volunteers that we can collapse them. So if I did 15 minutes in 2 weeks' time, I get to add that 15 minutes on the second week. So I got permission from our board to do that. And that made a difference because a lot of people were like, what do you mean it's not going to be
Yeah, yeah,
volunteer worthy? It is
yeah.
volunteer time, but it just isn't that much time per week or per day. So
Yeah.
anyway, but that was helpful to get that done. Um, I think that's pretty much what I
Okay.
had. If there is anything, I'm looking at my notes here real quick, see if there was anything I missed. Does anyone have any questions
Yeah.
for
Tina, let's hang on a minute. Let me
me?
switch over and have Meade kind of give us her
Yeah.
perspective and kind of what she did, because I think while she came out of the same kind of organizational structure, her experience was very different. So let's have her present her part here. And then what I'd like to do is put y'all back together and then field questions, because we're already getting some questions from Carol. Carol's asked about what is a master naturalist, because we
Mhm.
have other
Yeah.
parts of the country that may be able to use our Texas model here
Yes.
and
I would
learn
love it.
in that regard. But if we can, if you've done a great job here, Meade, can we switch over to you and you can kind of do a very similar story? Tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you came to this work and the successes and the learning opportunities that you've had in the Galveston Bay Area here along the Gulf Coast of Texas.
Sure, thank you. I've been a
Mhm.
Master Naturalist since 2020, and I'm also a part of the Native Plant Society. David came to our chapter to speak in February, and so because I've got that background in native plants as well as Master Naturalist, I decided to take it on as a project for our chapter. It took a while, frankly, it took a little while, as Tina mentioned, to do the research and to get the project approved for my chapter because there are a lot of restrictions that the Master Naturalists have on using citizen science apps. You cannot record time in your own backyard. You can't count that as time. So as Tina says, there's the timekeeping thing that you get a lot of motivation for because you get the pins at the end of the year. However, you can still do anything you want. If you can't record it, you can still do it. So, for instance, I still do observations in my own backyard for Nature's Notebook because I like it. Okay. So, I mean, it's not a total deal killer. But anyway, it took a little while for us to work through with the state. As some of the things that Tina mentioned, you have to have observations that somebody else is looking at. You can't just observe for your own fun because they're trying to make sure that it's really citizen science based. And you have to do the 15-minute increments. So that scaled us down to, how people would be using this. And then, similar to Tina, I identified some gardens. My Master Naturalist group only really has one of its own gardens that we share with the native plant people. So we have one of our own gardens, but there are other gardens where people have work days where they go once a week. So the University of Houston has a native plant garden, Seabrook Library has one, Armand Bayou Nature Center has one. So similar to Tina, they have work days where people show up. The work day is like every Tuesday morning or every Wednesday morning. A lot of those people that show up to do those native plant gardens are, guess what? They're master naturalists and they're native plant people. So the advantage of being native plant people is they know what the plants are, right? Because of the other people in my chapter that go do wetland restoration or they do prairie restoration or they do birding or whatever, they don't really know the plants. All right, so at each one of those gardens, and I listed out the work days, and I found a coordinator at each one. So this is kind of like a train the trainer concept, okay? So one person who's always there on Tuesday, Martha Richardson, will you be my contact? So I wanted to funnel people through her. They're already there, so they're already on site every week, working in the garden, weeding, getting ready for a plant sale, whatever, chit-chatting, having tea. you know, and so just within that whole 2 hour that you're there doing stuff, can you take out a little 15-minute pull out your phone? And it might not even be 15 minutes, but I think they're not quite as concerned about getting the 15-minute volunteer time because they're already at the garden, they're already motivated, they're already interested, they already like plants. So, I think that, and I know that people just, it's like it's not even worth, tracking the time for their 15 minutes. Of course, they fill out the Nature's Notebook. They go into the Time to Restore app, and they log their things there. So that's been my approach. It's been more of a train the trainer. We have some other gardens coming up because some other chapter members have received grants from HEB, for instance, a big grocery store, or Texas Parks and Wildlife. We have other gardens being created that are also close by to our area that we can add. The Master Gardeners have a beautiful native plant garden, so I'll go get started with them. It's a little hot in Texas right now, so so I mean, right now is not really a good time to go out and get people to stop sweating for a few minutes and show them something on a screen. So I'll take another run at this when the weather cools a little bit. But that's been the experience. We've got our foothold in. We've got some gardens going. I think we've got a process that works. It's one that I like, by having a coordinator at each site. So if anybody has a question, they go like, "Hey, where's Martha? I've got a question." Right? So there's somebody there, because I'm not working at these gardens every week. I'm actually not working at these gardens because I have my own yard, to tell you the truth. So I'm more there as a bit like the facilitator for the gardens that we're setting up. And that is pretty much really, again, similar to what Tina said, a little bit different in terms of approach. Not as many nature centers that I've identified yet, but we'll add them in as we go.
Let me jump in here. Thank you so much, Meade. Let me jump in here. So Meade just kind of touched on something that came up early on when I started working with Master Naturalist and Master Gardener chapters across Texas to bring them to Time to Restore. One of the things that was very sensitive was many of the Master Naturalist chapters perceived this as a gardening thing. And many of the Master Gardener chapters saw this as a nature thing. And so working through how each one of them saw this was very different. In fact, we had one chapter in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that didn't want to have anything to do with this because they saw this as a gardening thing. And they felt like that was infringing on the Master Gardeners. I know Rita and Steve come from the Master Gardener standpoint, and so they see this in a very different light. But here in Texas, this has been much more embraced by Master Naturalist chapters. Carol, you asked about what is a Master Naturalist class. Can you tell me which state you're in? And you may actually it may be under a different name. Most states in our country now have a Master Naturalist programming effort that's coordinated by the state through usually the county extension offices. And it's usually a sister to the Master Gardener program, which is much older in our country. But the Master Naturalists have been around for about 25 years now here in Texas. And they're popping up all over the country. In fact, I don't know that there are very many sizable states left in our great country that don't have a Master Naturalist effort. And so you can usually reach out to your local county administration office or their extension office, and they can direct you to that effort. It is on the East Coast called various names. Conservation Corps is one of the names I've seen before, but it usually deals with the natural environment and using volunteers to help tell the story about being smarter with natural resources. Master Gardeners do a very similar thing with the more permaculture, more growing environment. And so maybe that'll help you. I'd be happy to try to assist directly if you want to reach out to me after this. But Meade and Tina, thank you so much. Your perspectives have been very helpful here. What I'd like to do is open it up to the entire group. Erin, if you're okay with that, open it up to the entire group and have y'all ask questions, because I think you've got some really great resources. Both Meade and Tina have come through this largely through their own kind of, I can do this and I'm going to make it work, with the politics and all that came with it. And they've created some really unique models for their communities and their counties that I think all of us could learn from. So with that, I'd like to open it up and have you field questions for Meade or Tina if you have them. And don't
Carol,
be shy, group, I know.
Yeah, did you want to share, Carol, where you're located?
I'm located in New Paltz, New York, but our group has been set up very, very differently from these two.
Okay. Any questions, Carol? So you actually, I do know that New York actually has a Master Naturalist program at the state level. I don't know how far they are from where you're at. Um, at least exploring the linkages would be really beneficial, because I know some of the individuals on this call, like Grace, have really struggled with being able to get access to potential volunteers to help with the data observation and collection. So feel free to ask some questions here of Meade and Tina, if you have some, about kind of how we came to build this team of volunteers to work in their native gardening display gardens.
We recruit volunteers very differently.
Okay.
How do you
Has
do
it been as successful?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's a very successful program. I think it's at the Mohawk Preserve, which is sort of the area that surrounds the Mohawk Mountain House. And it's building on the legacy of Dan Smiley, who did phenology. But this is on a new parcel of land that has a trail with trees and shrubs and herbs. We have an orientation every spring where we recruit new people. And then throughout the rest of the year, we go out and we collect data with the volunteers, or the volunteers go out on their own and collect data once we train them. And then that data gets submitted to NPN.
Cool.
Yeah, very
Mohawk
different
is a
model.
very long running program. I appreciate you being here, Carol. And I want to mention, I put in the chat a link to Ann Ross, which is it's the Alliance of Natural Resource something programs, but it's not comprehensive, but it does have quite a few Master Naturalist programs listed in there. And then I did just look up New York, and it looks like it's run through Cornell University. So if you can't find your state in the Ann Ross list, you could just Google or search for Master Naturalist in my state, and then probably find it.
Questions, thoughts from individuals on the call for Meade or Tina?
Well, I just want to mention, I had the same thing, thinking like master gardeners, they're just out with their weed killer and their bug killer, and they want to grow tomatoes and they want to squish anything that moves, right? But my master gardener group that is near here has a beautiful and an enormous native plant garden, in addition to all their vegetables and fruit trees and things that they're growing. So you'll be surprised that I think that there's a merging, of interest taking place. So I would definitely encourage reaching out to the master gardeners as well, and that they're on my list to add them as soon as the weather cools down a little bit.
And Meade brings up such a great point, y'all. I actually learned about wildscaping first from the master gardeners. I actually stumbled across a display that they had done on a local community college campus, and fell in love with what they had created that was entirely populated with native plants. So don't discount the gardeners. The gardeners can absolutely bring something to the table in terms of being able to do outreach and education among the public, particularly as it relates to phenology and your local phenology program efforts.
And here in Tarrant County, we're almost all the same group. Like I'm getting my certification as a master gardener. They're all about native plants. I mean, the wildscapes, the way stations are run by them, but we're all there. Almost everyone I know has both certifications. So it hasn't really been a conflict here, because we're all on board really on the same focus with protecting pollinators and getting more native plants everywhere.
Rita and I are doing a Nature's Notebook phenology group that's part of the Master Gardener program in Pima County. And the Master Gardener program here has one large area, kind of what used to be on the outskirts of town, but the town is surrounding it now. But it's got a number of separate gardens that focus on different things, including a xeriscape garden, which is largely native desert dwelling plants. And each of those gardens has a separate committee. The phenology committee doesn't have a specific garden that it's associated with, but we're just one more committee in the Master Gardener program here, and we kind of have some trails with specific plants throughout the garden area. Quite a few of them in the xeriscape, but other garden areas as well. So I don't know, it worked out very well that we got designated a committee, sort of equivalent to the Rose Garden Committee or the Xeriscape Committee or what have you. So we have kind of a pool of people that we can approach who would want to become members of our phenology committee. And we've actually been, pretty successful at having a little presentation and there's a time each year when new master gardeners kind of wander around and see what the different gardens are like, and we have a poster about phenology, and yeah, we've been able to pick up half a dozen or more people each year, and it's worked out quite well.
Yeah, great perspective there. Hey, Meade, Tina, one of the things that might be helpful for the group, since y'all are so new and you've been able to learn how to adapt your reality to the phenology effort, Nature's Notebook, and our attempt to collect data, can you give us an example of one or two things you would do differently that you set out that you thought you were going to carry through with, and very quickly learned we need a different approach? And Tina, I suspect I know yours when you started to sip from that fire hydrant. But it'd be nice to see your perspective, because I think both of y'all came at this. Meade used much of the existing infrastructure in terms of leaders at individual gardens. Tina kind of came at it from a larger overall activity that could be done in any number of places around their service area. Could both of y'all give us an example of something that you would probably do differently that you had to learn very quickly when you set out to do this?
Let's see. Let me think. Probably multiple things. I think. Oh, give me a minute to think. Do you have an example for me? Maybe you've got it down and I don't.
Meade, do you have one to start?
No, I think that what I think is working in my case is having people who are already there, because I have asked a couple people they like to hike in the Challenger 7, park, and there's some plants there, and would I set them up? And then it just doesn't happen. So I think you've got to be thinking about, are people going to be here on a weekly basis?
True.
Right. They're not going to drive out. I'm not going to drive half an hour and get out of my car for 10 minutes and get back in and drive back. That's just not going to,
Right.
I don't think it's going to be easy to get the consistency that you want unless people are already there for a different reason. So that's why I think tying it to work days, already scheduled times, just like when they say when you want to take on a new habit, add it to another habit you're already doing. Like you're already brushing your teeth every night. Here's mine. I'm already brushing my teeth every night. Just take that vitamin pill when you're brushing your teeth, because I brush my teeth every night without fail. Right? So that's the idea. Is like, can you tack it onto something that's already taking place to get that sustainable, repeatable effort that the project needs.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. That we've only gone with that approach. That we don't want anybody driving anywhere to document, and I think one difficult thing is we're asking them to do this at least weekly, more often in the spring, more often in the fall, but at least weekly, and that's a little overwhelming for folks. But at the sites, we have, like we have a primary person who's got alternates. If they can't be there that week, Karen's going to ask Marcy to do it that week. So we just put it in place where it can stay consistent without them feeling like, oh my gosh, for 3 years I have to do this every week. That's
I tend to
Gotta get
agree.
over that.
I want to echo what Meade and Tina just brought up, y'all. One of the things that was we get caught up in wanting to do something for the betterment of the climate and the research community and science in general. But if this effort, it takes so little extra time that it really needs to be a +1 for some other activity. And being on site is the huge first step. I cheat a little bit because I actually set mine up. So I do a daily walk through my neighborhood. And so I said, you know what? I think I'll identify sites that I have to walk through anyway. So I was going to already be there. And if I can identify 2 or 3 plants that fit within the parameters of what we're trying to do, that's the way to do this. So I think that's a big learning lesson there is pick something that you know you're already going to be there to do and then tag on to that. So, other questions, thoughts, Carol?
I found that what I do now is that I go out every Friday and I try to schedule it at the very same time. And the people who are my volunteers often like to accompany me.
Yeah.
It becomes a social connection
Yes.
as well. And I've gotten to know these people really well. And so I like that aspect of it. And right now we don't have another person, but typically we have 2 people going out, and it depends on people's availability, whether they can come with another person or with me, but they like that social aspect a lot.
That's great. Yeah, that's something that I heard both Tina and Ma talk about too, is the importance of the mentors and having someone who's experienced to go out with the new people. And I'm just wondering, like, those of you that are on the call right now that are other local phenology leaders, how many of you use that kind of model? Do you have a kind of a mentor role for new observers to help them get kind of used to it? And you could raise hands in the Zoom or unmute and share if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to share that we have at the demonstration gardens of the Master Gardener Program, we have 40 plants that we've selected, and that's divided into 3 groups, or excuse me, 3 trails of about 13 or 14 plants each, and each trail has 2 groups, and they're like usually about 3 people, 2 or 3 people. In a group, and they alternate with each other every other week, those 2 groups on that trail. So there's an established schedule, and the people going on week 1 and week 3 are the same people. Now it's been year after year. So you really get to establish a relationship with people that and the camaraderie of it has been really wonderful. So you're the way it works for us. It might not work, as a organizational scheme for every group, but it's just so pleasant. I mean, to the point where there was one year when the person who was the coordinator before or the chairperson before us switched a person without talking to her about it first. And the woman was actually in tears. She just couldn't imagine she couldn't imagine, and she had no issue with the other people that she was assigned to. It was just such a loss. So it got juggled around, and she still, to this day, now we're 2 more years later, she's still in that very same group. So the social ties that have developed have been a really important part of sustaining the continuity of the program.
Great. Yeah, and it's interesting that you all have the kind of committee organization within the Master Gardeners. Is that something that Master Naturalists have as well? Kind of like different committees that focus on different topics?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's certain master naturalists who only want to deal with sea turtles, sea turtle rescue, or birds or
bluebird
whatever.
boxes.
Bluebird
Yes.
boxes, yeah, definitely.
So this is a question to pose, Carol, to you and to Rita, and maybe to Meade and Tina as well. Is it as much a social activity as being part of a group that creates maybe some accountability. So you show up because you know they're going to need you there
Yes.
to be part of that group. Okay, I
Absolutely.
think that's kind of what I've been seeing as well. The whole idea of it being social, but also a bit of accountability and a bit of a learning opportunity as well. If you don't know that plant very well. So great feedback.
Yes.
Yeah, and when we get new members, we'll divide them up into existing groups, and so they are learning, earning while they learn, sort of thing.
Yeah, they'll learn from the people that are in the group that have been doing it now. There's a couple, we have a couple of people it's at least 4 that I can just think of off the top of my head, including us. And it might be a few more than that have been with our program, our phenology program since it was started. Now it's going on 5 years, I guess. It's 4.5 to 5 years. And here we are still
plugging along.
still doing it.
Yeah, Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I have encouraged some of my people, there's a lot of variability among volunteers and how accurately they can judge what they're looking at with a phenophase. And so if I'm taking a vacation or I have something else that will prevent me from being there, I encourage these people to take my place. And they have been willing to do that. I've been very pleased that they're willing to take the lead. And I also saw one of the questions was, do they include animals? And our group includes eastern painted turtles, 2 types of frogs in the springtime, and monarch butterflies.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, Nelson asked that. Great. Glad you put that in there, Carol. Nelson asked whether there were groups that focused on animals versus plants. Nelson, there are no restrictions here. Just understand that Meade and Tina came at this as part of the Time to Restore project, which looks at flowering and fruit production of native plants. And so that's kind of where why we were talking a lot about plants. But I have encouraged people as Nature's Notebook users to broaden what they look at, because it will make it more interesting as they go through the process. So, if you are a butterfly person and you want to join the Time to Restore project, you can do that. You can add monarchs as part of your observed organisms, and it adds to the overall interest and probably to the data set for the future as researchers look at whatever you're collecting as part of that effort. So great question.
Yeah, I also have, but it also brings up a lot of focus for years from this group has been using iNaturalist.
Yeah.
Rather than Nature's Notebook. They love it. We love it. I enter stuff in it all the time. So I'm saying you can, for this Time to Restore, it's okay to do both. We would prefer you did Nature's Notebook. We can get more reports, more out of it that way. But yeah, if you saw the bumblebee there, yeah, put that down in iNat. And don't forget to add the phenophase, because iNat now has an area where you can add phenophases. That's been new for them. So so we still use iNat. We still encourage its use, especially that. But also in Nature's Notebook, I'm following 2 species of hummingbirds. It's been fun.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you can definitely do both programs. And I think iNat is great for kind of uploading anything you want to, right? Because there's not really a limit on what you can put in there. But to kind of pick out a couple species of hummingbirds or whatever it might be, where you really want to get like an in-depth look, because what you do in Nature's Notebook is instead of just submitting a one-time photo, you're tracking that species over time and trying to kind of cover the whole life cycle over the season. So you wouldn't want to pick everything for that, and like pick 20 species of animals, it would be too much. But just picking a couple that you really are interested in is a great idea.
Yeah, and to add on to what Aaron just said there, it's also, I find, really interesting if you connect it to, say, the host plant. So if you're already observing the host plant and you add an insect that really relies on it, like a milkweed or a particular nectaring species, it can really you start to see those connections as well as the connections between that plant and the natural environment or climate as well. So it can really add to your whole phenology experience.
I also wanted to direct people to the chat. There's some amazing stuff in there right now. And I wanted to give a shout out to Fawn in particular. I just love that idea of incorporating your phenology strolls along with the church visits. That's just amazing. And I think it builds on the idea of like I think what Meade was saying about trying to get people where they already are and get them interested while they're already at a place and get them doing something new. So I think that's a really great example.
Yeah, that's great, Fawn. Great. Really great feedback.
I see there's a question in the chat about a phenophase. So yeah, if you are not familiar with the phenophases, those are basically the questions that we have on the Nature's Notebook data sheets. So when you're filling out the app and doing your visit for the day, each of those life cycle stages that we're asking you about is what we call a phenophase. So I'll grab an example of one of our kind of data sheets and put it in the chat so you can see what those look like. But it'll be something like, do you see open flowers? And the open flowers is a phenophase.
That's so interesting.
Other thoughts? Are there any others that would give perspective? I think that everybody, one thing that I've learned from this group is everybody comes to this group, this Murmuration meeting, from a totally different perspective and usually from a different part of the country. So any of your thoughts or feedback here is most welcome because it adds to the collective hive, if you will, of knowledge and understanding and appreciation of what we do.
I really love that idea of like the habit forming. That's just something that I feel like we really need to try to emphasize that. So I'm wondering, are there any other ideas? I love the idea of like, trying to figure out what are people already doing and then have them add the phenology to that. Are there any other ideas of ways to make that easier to kind of like remember to do it or to like get over that hump of, it takes a while when you're first getting started because you have to figure out what the questions mean, but then eventually it'll become shorter. And so it might be easier to fit in. But any other thoughts along those lines?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I just use my phone for everything. I set reminders up all the time. I'm retired now and I'm finally good at a to-do list, right? But I finally figured out how to make the technology work for me. So for my own yard, you know, it's just like anything else. You have to get it on a schedule. I mean, I'm just a big believer. You're not going to say, "Oh, I'll just do it sometime every week," And I think maybe Tina mentioned that as well. You have to get it on a schedule so that you're committed to that time period. When I was working, somebody said if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't get done. It has to be in a carved out spot. So I think that's really the only advice I have is that encourage people to find a time that they can commit to every single week if possible.
Reminders are so important. I set them all the time now. I didn't used to have to do that, but I feel like it doesn't stay in my head anymore. So every time I think of something I have to do, I make just on my Google Calendar app, I add something like remember to do this one thing. I love that.
I saw
Barb,
where Fawn, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Tina. Go
I
ahead.
just saw where Fawn asked if there were phenophases for bumblebees, and yes, they are. And in nature, will tell you what those are, but it'll be things, like building nests or, attending to plants, things like that. So, but they're in there mating. Are they mating? So those are the kinds of things that it'll ask about bumblebees.
I will put that one in the chat as well. Yeah, this is and bumblebees, because they're kind of hard to identify for most people unless you're capturing them and looking at them very closely. We have them at the level of the genus, so it's kind of like any bumblebees, you can report on them.
Yeah,
it's probably better.
Yeah, and for Texans, y'all, bumblebees, we have a manageable number of species, but if you get out on the western side of the continent, the number of species gets a lot bigger, a lot quicker. And so it becomes a lot more difficult to know which one. You can kind of tell it's a bumblebee, but that's about as far as you can get without being able to closely examine them. So, but fascinating insects to observe. Barb, you had a question that came up in the chat, and I think it's a really important question. It's that what is that persuasive rationale that you might use to encourage a collective observation group? I think Carol kind of hit on it, Rita kind of hit on it, Tina and me definitely hit on it. It's that social, the ability to do this as a social group is something that kind of keeps accountability for the group there, but it also provides a natural learning environment between different levels of experience. So if you can get somebody to kind of stay with the group, like Rita talked about, and kind of become part of the wallpaper, if you will, it really gives others, particularly newbies, the opportunity to learn from them, because it won't just be about that one plant. It'll also be about the other things you encounter on that trail. And Rita, maybe there's some perspective there, because I think y'all have a very rich model that really probably helps with telling that persuasive rationale for encouraging a group.
Yeah, I think that everything you've said, I certainly agree with, and I don't think we'd be where we are now with our group, which I consider quite successful, without that camaraderie and learning together and socializing. And what has become of paramount importance, both within the Master Gardener program to help other Master Gardeners feel why it's important, because they're already going and doing something in their garden every week with a nice bunch of people. I mean, it's still important to expand that, but I think that of critical importance is including, when you're talking about this to other people, climate change. It's such an important aspect of what we're doing, of adding to the understanding of climate change. And not everybody, but most people are worried about it. And you know what, is still a delightful member of our group who said, what do I tell people when they ask me, why do you do that? Why do you do that? And of course, the camaraderie and the learning and everything is really important. But when you say climate change, everyone goes, aha. Then they really, really get it. It seems like so. Why people are out doing this, on a regular basis, because we're really adding to the scientific data of the world.
Yeah, when I read a great illustration of probably the most important point, right? I know when I do trainings here in Texas, one of the things that I get to very quickly that really rings true for many of the audiences I'm speaking to is how little data we have to be able to inform policy decisions. And this is your opportunity as a lay citizen, as an amateur naturalist, as just a general observer, to be able to plug in and help tell a story about something that's important for all of us. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Carol.
One of the things that I do as the coordinator of the phenology volunteers is that I prepare about every 2 field trips a newsletter that I send out to all the participants. And I put on it, especially the first time we see a particular phenophase. But then along in the newsletter, I can also put information about climate change. And I was just reading something that you put out, Erin, that was from NOAA. And I'm thinking about how to incorporate that into my newsletter, because everybody has realized how in our area, the weather has been so strange this spring. So that's how I try to get them continually involved in it, and also introduce them to climate change and how important it is.
That's so wonderful that you put together a newsletter. Thank you for doing that. I know that takes a lot of work. So, and it's also so important to be able to share back information with your observers. So thank you for doing that. I'd love to see it if you wouldn't mind sending me a copy. Maybe I could use it as an example for others too.
Yeah, Carol, I'd love it if that is available. I would love to see it too, because I've struggled with how to do that same thing with a small group and still have it be meaningful and lastful. So if you would be willing to share that, I would love it as well.
Okay.
Yeah, is that something that others on the call would be interested in hearing more about on a future call and want to raise hands? We could definitely have another murmuration focused on that and seeing a lot of yeses and hands. Okay.
And I'm going to say goodbye. I have another meeting to go to.
Okay, thank you so much for joining
Thank you.
us.
It was
It's
very
nice to meet you.
interesting.
Meade, Tina, we thank you so much for joining us today. I think that your stories have enlightened us and really helped tell the story of what we're all trying to do. And thanks to everybody else who also provided input and information and shared with us today. These have become, on a monthly basis, a real resource for all of us. So we thank you for taking the time to share with us, and we hope that everybody got something out of it. And at this point, if you will, go ahead and make your copy of the chat, because there was some really good information in this chat. I know I've already made a copy of it. And thank you all for joining us. Turn it back to you, Erin.
Thank you. Yeah, if anyone needs a little instructions on that, if you are in the chat next to the name of the meeting, there's 3 little dots. You type or press on those dots, and then you can save the chat. So if you'd like to do that, you can do that now.
Okay.
But thank you so much again. Yeah, just to reiterate what David was saying, that was so valuable. I think we'll do a lot more of these where we have some panelists or speakers come and share a little bit. I think we all learned a lot, and we just really appreciate your efforts in Texas and all that you're doing. And I look forward to hearing how it continues to evolve, because you're still so new and you've already done amazing things. So I'm sure we check in with you again next year. It'll be even more great stuff.
Where would we find it?
And if you have any suggestions for any future topics, again, feel free to reach out to me, or you can always reply to those monthly murmuration emails. We're always looking for more ideas for things to talk about. So
I have a quick question.
yeah,
We saved the chat. Now in the future, where would we find it?
it should download in your download folder.
Yep.
Oh,
wherever
great.
that may be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it'll usually say that, Rita. It'll say like it's the chat from such and such meeting. So that's a good place to go, though. Just go to your Finder.
Great.
Yeah.
I can do downloads.
Great.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Have a
Yeah.
wonderful day, and thanks for joining us this month.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.